A few days ago, I came across this really interesting video produced by the CNN's YouTube channel. The name of the video was called "Why the Rate of Single Men in the US Looking for Dates Has Declined." Now, of course, this video is based on the Pew Research article that was done roughly around last month. But for me, I was interested to see what they had to say, so I pressed play.
Last week, I delved here into recent data from the CDC suggesting major problems with regard to the mental health of our adolescents, surges in depression and suicidal ideation, especially true for our girls. This week, I found cause to worry about young men. This headline from The Hill, it caught my eye. Most young men are single, most young women are not. The story reported that as of 2022, Pew Research Center found 30% of U.S. adults are neither married, living with a partner, nor engaged in a committed relationship. Nearly half of all young adults are single. Now, look at these numbers. 34% of women, twice as many, a whopping 63% of men. What explains that? I pulled the Pew study and I read with interest. Turns out since 2019, the share of single men who say they're looking for dates or a relationship has declined from 61% to 50%. In 2018, 28% of men ages 18 to 30 reported they'd had no sex in the past year, compared with 18% of women of that age. The Hill report said men in their 20s are more likely than women in their 20s to be romantically uninvolved, sexually dormant, friendless, and lonely. They stand at the vanguard of an epidemic of declining marriage, sexuality, and relationships that afflicts all of young America. Among the causes, among the factors, a reliance on social media and online porn. But also, more young women are hooking up with each other or dating and marrying slightly older men, and heterosexual women are getting more choosy. Other troubling statistics about men come from a 2021 study from the Survey Center for American Life. They found the share of men who have 6 or more close friends, which in 1990 was 55%, by 2021 had shrunk by half. Meanwhile, those with literally 0 close friends, which stood at 3% in 1990, has zoomed to 15%. An expert quoted by The Hill said this disconnect can have catastrophic consequences for young men. Quote, in the worst case scenario, the young American man's social disconnect can have tragic consequences. Young men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of young women. Younger women are largely responsible for rising rates of mass shootings, a trend that some researchers link to their growing social isolation. Well, those words reminded me of a conversation that I had over a year ago right here on CNN with NYU professor Scott Galloway.
Some of this information for many of us is normal. We know about this. But I think something that wasn't talked about in that Pew Research article was the fact that so many men used to have a lot of friends. Now, I want to stop right there because we don't think so much of it. Like when I was younger in the 90s, I had more friends because, I was less on the internet and obviously I was younger. But I always thought the reason why I have less friends is because, well, I'm a little bit older now and I'm living in a different country. So of course I don't have the friends that I used to have. And then I'm looking at this information here and I'm just seeing that there's a reason why men don't have friends. Now, what does that have to do with the lack of dating? Stick with me, okay? Now, in my grandfather's generation, and even in his older years, he had a lot of friends. What did those friends do? They went to church together. They went to picnics together. It was family functions, right? And because of that whole community aspect, we had much more of a community. What do I mean when I say a community? Well, in the black community, even in the 80s and 90s, which I call the last generation of Medea, you had a lot of blacks that had barbershops, blacks that had mechanic shops. You had blacks that had restaurants. So because of that community, money was circulating more than it does now. And of course, when you have those things, men are more masculine, and obviously you get to meet more people through that fellowship. But that's not how people are meeting today. It's very unlike it was when we were coming up. And that brings us to NYU professor of the School of Business, Mr. Scott Galloway. Now, he was on CNN last year talking about this same thing, and very interesting, Michael Smercornish, the guy you heard previously, noted that he was the only one that would take this interview. In other words, Mr. Galloway was talking about the problems that men were having, but a lot of the stations thought it would be misogynistic just for him to talk about the problems of men. So I want to add that. But Professor Scott Galloway breaks something down also in the second part of the interview about what's really going on with men in today's world.
And then, Scott, you toss in the influence of social media and how relationships today, they don't come from, in our era, happenstance and mingling, right? They come from swiping, and that further accelerates this issue. Am I right?
Oh, it's been the chaser to it. I mean, to have an honest conversation about this, we have to be honest, and that is that men and women have different mating criteria. One quarter of men saying economic viability is a key criteria in a mate. 3/4 of women say that is important. And when you're on a two-dimensional format, where now it's 1 and 2 relationships begin online, it used to be 1 and 4 just a few years ago, it gets distilled down to a small number of criteria. Specifically for men, it's does she look attractive? And specifically for men, is he able to signal his ability to garner resources in the future? An average attractive male on Tinder gets swiped less than 1% of the time. And there's 3 men on Tinder for every 1 woman. So you've distilled it, you've taken out one of the key components of mating dynamics, and that is vibe, humor, body language, pheromones, the ability to be, quite frankly, a little bit persistent in the pursuit of a romantic relationship. We have no third places anymore, no places to meet. People aren't going to bars, they aren't sports league, they aren't going to church, they aren't even going to work. So it gets distilled down to very 1 or 2 dimensional attributes. And the reality is women are much choosier than men, and they can apply those screens, and they allocate all of their attention to a small number of men that results in just essentially at the end of the day, a lack of opportunities. Chris Williams summarized it perfectly. He called it the high heels effect. In the last 40 years, more women have graduated from college than men, and they're not interested in mating with non-college grads. They now own more homes, single women, than single men. So what you have is women say they won't date anyone shorter than them, 50% of them. Effectively, what you have metaphorically over the last 40 years is women have been getting taller and taller, and men have been getting shorter and shorter. How many of us have said, I know a ton of great single women, they can't find a date? That's not true. They can't find a date. They can't find a man they find economically or emotionally viable. If we don't make a massive investment in young people and make more economically and emotionally viable men, we're going to see a lack of household formation, we're going to see a decline in the middle class, and we're going to see, quite frankly, just a lot of young men who are terrible citizens.
You know, I want to talk about this. This is very important. In today's world, most meetings, about 50%, are happening online. When I was coming up in the 90s and 2000s, people thought you were crazy for dating somebody off of like Yahoo Messenger or Black Planet. But this is quite normal. People are meeting across, the world, across the United States, picking up, moving to different cities. And how are people doing so? They're doing so with things like Match.com or Tinder, and even average, normal, attractive guys who in times past would have a lot more opportunities don't anymore. That is because the most attractive men are getting all of the attention. Why is that? Well, women also like guys who have humor, good body language, a vibe. And if you're online, you don't get to show those particular attributes. If you're a good dresser, you don't get to show that. If you have a good perfume choice or cologne choice, you don't get to show that. You don't get to show your swag when you're looking at pictures. And another thing is, like Professor Scott Galloway said, men are not even going to the office anymore if they work. I mean, a lot of guys just to get somebody from their job. And then if you're not going to bars, if you're not going to clubs, if you're not going to networking events, and that obviously has to do a lot with COVID and post-COVID and stuff like that, you feel alienated that you don't know how to talk to women. And all of this has created what I would consider a socially awkward man. We don't want to talk about it, but men just don't know how to communicate because of what's going on the internet. And I have some proof to talk about how men are just they're just really so done with dating. And how can we know this? Well, we got some proof, unfortunately. And we're even seeing it with these comments. Look at this from Mr. Anthony Fayel, just maybe a day ago. He says this: I stopped dating at 19, currently 30, and haven't been in a relationship since. I made a conscious choice back then to stop dating because I wanted to find myself and what I wanted. I realized I was happier alone. Women being hypergamous makes dating a constant game of trying to prove oneself with very little actual payoff. I came to the conclusion that there are 4 main reasons to be in a relationship. 1, pleasure can be achieved without a partner. 2, companionship can be achieved through a pet. 3, help around the house can be achieved with a roommate, family, or hired help. 4, reproduction. I can honestly care less. Now, while Mr. Scott Galloway is talking about the empowerment of men, and in this article he talks about the great Dwight Eisenhower, how he created the middle class and investing into the infrastructure that brought that out. I think what guys don't understand is that men's role have stayed pretty much constitutive. I always use this argument in talking about my grandfather. My grandfather in 1949 was 31 years old. He was baptized at the Macedonian Baptist Church in North Richmond, and he had a 3rd grade education, but he was expected to do many things for the family. Now, obviously women, they were oppressed in American society, and they have much more freedoms now, and it's much more favorable for a woman to have a job, to have gainful employment, even running businesses, even having home ownership. Women's roles have changed. Men's roles are the same. And most men can look at their mother and their grandmother and see how their grandfathers and mothers were treated, and look at the dating pool, and what guys are saying is, wait a minute, you want me to get married when I'm getting less than what my father had, but yet I still have to be the same man as them? What's the incentive? And that's what Mr. Galloway, I don't think, is actually either discussing or understands. Maybe he does, just doesn't want to get canceled. Another thing, brother says J Money. He puts this comment out. I'm a 39-year-old single man with no kids. I have no interest in dating anymore because I don't see the benefit in doing so. Stop right there. This is men really talking about this, right? It's not even about anymore trying to get a woman because women are selective. Doesn't matter, right? What matters is that men don't find value in these women. That's something that everybody's leaving out. For example, if I can't get a Lamborghini, but I really, really want it, I might strive trying to get it until I can, achieve it. But if I don't see any value in it, what's the purpose? Now, he said this, I've worked so hard to get where I'm at financially. I can't imagine getting married, then a divorce and seeing half of everything I worked so hard for go out the window because she's not happy. Let's stop right there. This is something that guys are talking about. Again, it's when we talk to men. Men don't want to risk working hard for what they have to lose everything they have to somebody else. I no longer want kids either. I'm just tired of dealing with the lies and the games, bad attitude, the manipulation, being a stepdad to her kids, being looked at as a wallet and not a person. I'm done. I finally have peace. I'm stress-free. No drama. I can save more, invest more, do anything I want now. I'm much happier single compared to being in a relationship. I'm not sure if this will change for me in 3 to 5 years from now, but as of right now, I don't want to be bothered. This is the next one. Mr. Ryan Hampson says, I'm 43 and I've noticed this shift gradually over the last 20 years. Social media has filled the gap of social needs of many rather than actually going out and having meaningful relationships, either romantically and platonically. There is a reason we have an anxiety and depression problem in this country. A lot of people have become shut-ins, and some haven't developed the social skills to function in a public setting, and that brings a lot of anxiety to some. That brings the ability I want to talk about of being socially awkward. I mentioned that. A lot of men are socially awkward because of social media. However, you can overcome being socially awkward if you feel like whatever you want to achieve is advantageous. Men don't see any value of getting married because of the outcomes of what's happened to being married. And while it may be good to invest in the young men to want to be married, some of the things have to change as far as the laws in order for them to do it. But guys, what do you think? It's your boy, O'Shea Duke Jackson, back at it again with another episode of The Celebrity Junk. I really appreciate you for all that you do. Subscribe, hit the bell. We're out.